We raised $2.5 million in about 3 weeks, right around Christmas 2 years ago. And then from that led to this next deal where we raised $3 million in about 4 weeks to buy some land. And then now we're going to move into phase 2 to build these 52 units here in San Diego.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. 𝗪𝗁𝗀𝗄.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dr. 𝗪𝗁𝗀𝗄, and today I am joined by Dr. David Namazy. He is a physician. He's the medical director of his vascular center in Southern California. He's an active real estate investor with a portfolio spanning Texas and Southern California. He's built experience across single-family investments, ADU development, which I'm really excited to talk about tonight, multifamily syndications, preferred equity raises, and ground-up development. He's currently leading strategic partners on a 52-unit multifamily project in San Diego. He also mentors physicians and professionals who are entering the world of real estate investing. I'm really looking forward to this episode. David, welcome to the podcast. How are things going in sunny San Diego?
Hey, Alex, thanks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, things are great here. You know, it was like 82 degrees here today, so I can't complain while the rest of the country's kind of cold. It's usually pretty nice here. So, yeah.
That sounds good.
Done well.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous. It was pretty cold today in Colorado, but we need some cold. We need some snow. It's been a pretty dry winter for sure out here.
Yeah, I hope you get some.
I hope so too. Well, for folks who haven't met you yet, or for that intro, is there anything that I'm missing? And then I'd love to talk about your journey into medicine and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, no, that all the stuff you said made me tired just thinking about doing all that stuff. I'm thinking, what am I thinking? It's been about 5 years since I started doing this. You know, it's one of those people that kind of knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was a kid, you know? And so like it was that dream that you chased since you were little, and you always had that next thing. It was high school, then it was college, and then it was the MCAT, and then it was med school, and like, you know, residency, fellowship, whatever. And you always had kind of that next goal. And I felt like, you know, at some point, I loved being a doctor. I love being a nephrologist. I spend most of my time kind of doing interventional work. I fix dialysis grafts and fistulas mostly. So I'm kind of lucky because I get to do procedures all day. But, you know, at some point, you get married, you have kids, you got your job, you're happy. And then you're like, well, what's my next achievement thing, right? As doctors, we're so used to achieving that next thing. And I felt like that just wasn't there at some point, you know? And it just so happened that kind of real estate and learning this whole new language, this whole new thing came in just at the perfect time.
That is awesome. How did you first start getting interested in real estate and entrepreneurship?
You know, it's interesting. My wife, who's also a physician, has always been kind of entrepreneurial. You know, she's an allergist, and she kind of started this home allergy company. And then she moved towards she has a company that makes little jewelry called stethoscope charms for nurses that put them on their stethoscope. So she's always been kind of entrepreneurial. And so she's always listening to these podcasts. And I always thought she was kind of crazy. It's about 5 years ago. And she comes home one day and she's like, okay, we've got to do this real estate thing. She had listened to, I think it was Letty from Kenji from semi-retired community. And she was on Bonnie Coe's show, and she's like, this is amazing. We got to do this. And of course I was like, nah, this is crazy. This is not for us. You know, we're doctors. What are we thinking? We're not going to do this. She's like, okay, just hear me out. Just listen to this podcast. And so I did. And well, it's kind of interesting. I remember it was early Saturday morning. We were in Palm Springs. We have a house in Palm Springs. And that's kind of where I do my thinking. It's like my getaway where, you know, I don't have just day-to-day tasks that I feel like I need to get done at home, but it's my kind of quiet place. And, you know, if you have kids, getting up early Saturday morning is your kind of Zen time to think. And I started kind of listening to that podcast, and just got me kind of thinking. And I got more and more interested. We joined their community and took their course, Kenji and Letty's course, and they were great mentors. And we just kind of launched from there. So yeah, it's just been a journey ever since, just growth, constant growth.
That is amazing. Yeah, it's so cool to hear how a podcast episode can completely change the trajectory of your life. And I love hearing that. And Letty and Kenji are doing really great things in the space, and been fortunate to have connected with them as well. And they've certainly impacted a lot of physicians. So that's really cool. What did it look like for you kind of taking that leap into community education? You know, it costs money to do their program. What was that like for you? Was that something that you kind of struggled with, or were you pretty understanding like, hey, I need to do this for the next steps, for that accountability, et cetera?
Well, it's so interesting that you said it, because like as physicians, we often see people that potentially could help us as a liability, not an asset, because they cost money. And that's a real mindset shift for doctors. And I think part of that is that we along the way, there's an insurance salesman that probably was really after us. He got that chase energy, and that kind of turned us off, right? And so I feel like we worry about investing in things like that for ourselves, but it was probably the best money spent. When you invest in your education like that, and you actually do something with it, I think that was game changing. So that took a little mindset shift. It's like, yeah, this is going to be good. This can be an investment for us, And there were some big tax ramifications for us that we can certainly talk about, because tax is a big topic that I like to think about and talk about and spend some time learning about. So yeah, it started with that. The course was worth every penny. It was the right time, because I don't know if you have kids or how old your kids are, but at some point, you're working, your kids get to a certain age where they need you a little bit less, and you find yourself coming home from work and like, I'm not going to just watch TV all day, right? So it's a great time to take a course, So that's how you squeeze it into the end of your day, and that's what we did. It was a great investment.
That's great. I love to hear that. Yeah, I have a 5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and they're the best. It's so much fun. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They still think dad's the coolest, and I'm going to ride that out as long as I can. So I've actually kind of done the opposite approach. I just work part-time right now, about 2 days a week in medicine, and then get some more time with the boys while they still think I'm a superhero. So I've got to take advantage of that.
That was time well spent, my friend. Well done.
Absolutely. Well done. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, what did your first real estate deal look like after you guys got into the course and started learning more? What did that look like for you as you guys decided to take the leap?
Yeah. So, our market, we decided, because we have roots in Texas. I grew up in Texas. My wife, although originally from New York, we met in Texas at medical school in Houston, and I was a resident. She was a medical student. So we had ties to Houston and Dallas. And so really at the end of the course, the Zero Freedom course, we bought a duplex in Dallas. And it was interesting that we used a lot of our skills. We forced appreciation by adding a bedroom remotely. We hired a team, and, we started on a duplex. And I'll tell you, I think starting small for your first deal is good, because you can make mistakes. It's not going to hurt if you make mistakes, and those mistakes are invaluable, right? That's where the learning occurs. People say, well, you don't learn when things go well. That's the absolute truth. When things are going great, it's fun, right? But yeah, it was a duplex, and it didn't cash flow a whole lot, but it just was a way for us to learn, take the training wheels off, and actually do what we were learning.
Here's a quick reality check. If you are a physician building wealth through real estate, your biggest asset likely isn't your rental portfolio. It is your income. Financial freedom may only be a few properties away, but disability, that can wipe out the plan overnight if you're not protected. Leverage RX helps physicians get the right, true own occupation disability insurance, so your lifestyle, your family, and your investing plan stay intact no matter what. Go to leveragerx.com/physicians and properties. That's leveragerx.com/physicians and properties, and protect the thing that funds everything. Yeah, absolutely. That first deal just makes such a huge difference. And once you start getting kind of that little taste of alternative income or passive income, it's just the snowball from there. Yeah. Looking back on that first deal, anything you would have done any differently, or feel like that really kind of shaped how you invest today?
Yeah, it's funny. I think that I wouldn't do anything differently, to be honest with you. I think, like I said, it was the perfect opportunity for us to learn. And the biggest, I'm going to back up a little bit, because I didn't talk about one of the one of the biggest changes for me in this whole journey, and I remember, a lot of these real estate courses, a lot of these mentors talk a lot about your mindset and your limiting beliefs. And I thought that was a bunch of nonsense, honestly.
Me too.
I literally at the beginning, I told my wife, this is a cult. They're trying to suck us into something, right? But turns out that wound up being kind of the most important part of learning something new and shifting your mindset to telling yourself that you can do something different, And so for that deal, I don't think I would have done anything different. It was a way for me to practice some of these mindset patterns. We had challenges, right? We had a contractor that was wackadoodle, and we had some challenges, and we pushed through that instead of throwing up our hands and giving up. We decided to push through and really stick to, focus on the process. My daughter is a tennis player. All my kids are tennis players, but my little one's pretty good. And she's always trying to think about the outcome. Like, I want to win the game. And I always tell her, focus on that process and then the results will follow, right? And I know I laugh at myself for saying things like this, but these things actually are true. And that was one of the biggest part of really putting some of those principles in practice for that first deal,
Yeah, I agree. That is huge. And that's something I struggled with too. I don't know if it's a physician thing or what it is, but I felt the same way. I remember going to this first real estate kind of mastermind retreat in Breckenridge. And now we've been doing it for 5 years in a row. But that first one, I remember being there and sitting there and one of the speakers came to talk about mindset. I'm like, this is dumb. Like, someone just show me how I can buy a short-term rental or make some cash flow, And then looking back on it now, 5 years later, it's pretty much the same group. And we've all really realized, like, hey, these are the things that really matter. It's family, it's relationships, it's time freedom, it's financial freedom, and it's mindset. And all those things are so much more important than like the nuts and bolts of a specific deal, because there's a million different ways to make $1 million. But you have to have that mindset and that understanding and kind of put those limiting beliefs at bay to be able to achieve that. And it's just funny how that happens.
That's so true. And I remember, speaking of limiting beliefs, one of my partners, I remember telling me at work, he's like, what are you doing? Like, do you know how many thousands of professional investors are out there? How do you think you're going to compete with them? You're just a doctor, right? But I think we sell ourselves short, right? You think about what we went through to get to where we are. Tend to kind of be the most capable people in any room. And I think people respect us for that. The sacrifices that we made and what we've gone through. I think you really can do things, and you squeeze things in the margins. You have more time than you think to do things. I don't know if it's Tony Robbins that says that when you think you're maxed out, you have like another 40% to give or something like that. Yeah. I find that to be very true. But yeah, just pushing through those limiting beliefs. And that's what we did with that first deal. And it was a great opportunity to learn. Texas was our first market. And then I moved on from a duplex to a fourplex. And then onto a bigger property in Houston before I decided that I was going to focus on Southern California. So
that is awesome. It's cool to see how that stack happens, how you oftentimes start small, single family or duplex, and then a fourplex, then an eightplex, and then next thing you know, you're working on a 52-unit development, which is amazing. And I agree with everything that you said from that perspective. And I just want to foot stomp for the folks who are listening here. Like, if you're a doctor, you got through medical school, you got through residency, you're an attending, like, you can absolutely be a fantastic investor. Like, the physician brain is such an incredible thing, and we have so many skill sets that translate so well into real estate and entrepreneurship. So don't for a second think that you can't do this and can't be successful, but it does take some hard work. It does take working in the margins. It's not a get rich quick scheme. And so it is something that you have to figure out. Hey, how am I going to fit this into my life and the life that I want to live? But it's worth it for sure. Well, let's talk about those next deals. So how did those kind of stack up deals go from the duplex to the quadplex, et cetera? How was that for you?
Quad was my next step, and that was in Houston. So the first one was in Fort Worth. Second one was a fourplex in Houston, and just built a little team there. I really like that. Like, I grew up in Houston, and so my dad worked for NASA, so we lived out in the suburbs and in a town called Clear Lake. And so, but as I got older, I went to college in town in Houston, and I'd always go downtown and see some of these old, look like these old brick buildings in downtown Houston. I just love those old neighborhoods. And so when I had this opportunity to buy this kind of red brick, fourplex. Like it just kind of tugged at my heartstrings, and it was perfectly timed. I mean, the value was great. I was just kind of sad that this man he rehabbed the whole place. He loved it. He and his wife moved into one of the units. They did everything right, and then he died. Sadly.
Oh, wow.
And things like that actually make you stop and think too, by the way. But that opportunity came along. And so definitely grew a little bit bigger there, and was self-managing. I was self-managing all of this stuff remotely myself. I didn't have a property manager. And to this day, I still manage, that fourplex myself remotely. I manage the majority of my properties myself, other than my 12 units in Houston. So it was a great opportunity for me to buy something a little bit emotional, which you're not supposed to do as a real estate investor. But fortunately, it turned out good. The market timing was good. Interest rates were good, and so I still have that property today. So
that is awesome.
Like one.
Yeah. Well, and it's so cool to be able to impact, kind of the community that you grew up in and really have some ownership there like that.
Right.
That is really cool. What a cool project for you. What was it like pivoting from Texas to California? Certainly some differences in the market. What was that like for you?
Yeah. And, I think my pivot from Texas to California was probably, there's usually a deal that you feel like you didn't make a great decision on, right? And that was my next Texas deal. I was at 12 unit. What happens is you do fall into that kind of that trap of I want to go bigger. That 12 unit was an ego buy, and I wanted to own an apartment complex. Like I wanted to be a big real estate investor, right? I owned an apartment complex, so my friends could see that I owned an apartment complex, right? So it's 2022. Market was kind of was starting to turn, and as Ken McElroy says, don't catch a falling knife.
Yeah,
definitely caught a falling knife. Yep, but you know what? Again, best education you can have. It was my foray into a challenging property, larger property, one that I had to learn from using a property manager. The market timing was tough. Property values were still high as interest rates were still rising, and then suddenly they lost value. And so you just got to get creative as to how to keep that going until you get back into an environment. And that I still have that property. It's a bit of a challenge, but I think it was that you asked me about pivoting to California. It was kind of that deal that made me realize, I really want to manage something kind of in my backyard. I get a lot of pleasure about a tangible asset that I can see and touch, and I enjoy having people live in a property that I own and be happy there. I can't tell you, how much pride you take and responsibility actually in providing a good place for people to live. I think if you don't have that sense, then you're in this for the wrong reasons. So that project kind of made me pivot, even though I learned a lot from it, to the Southern California market. It's something I wanted to kind of see and touch myself day to day, and I couldn't do that in that remote market. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And it's at some point in your investing journey, you're going to have a difficult time. You're going to have some struggles, and you're going to have that property that you might have regretted buying. And I know, we felt the same way. And I feel the same way in assisted living that you do, providing good housing. It's like that purpose over profit mentality is really, really important in providing great housing, whether that's, in the multifamily space like you're doing in the ADU space or in senior housing. It's just really rewarding to be able to do that. What did the strategy look like for you when you first got started in Southern California?
Yeah, so I kind of stumbled upon a single family house, and it was kind of 2021. It was kind of the tail end of COVID, and rates were still kind of low. And actually, initially, my wife was just kind of looking at property because we were looking at something more coastal to have like a vacation home, and she was looking kind of at a north coastal San Diego market. There's you're military, so you might know about Camp Pendleton. And so there's a military neighborhood in Oceanside. It's just a major military hub, and so
I love Oceanside.
Oceanside's fantastic, but 5 years ago you wouldn't really want to be in Oceanside 10 years ago when it was late at night, because it was a rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how it was just starting to change about 5 years ago. And one thing my wife's good at is recognizing value and things that are on the path of progress. I feel like we're kind of a good team that way. She's good at that kind of stuff. I'm good at reading people, and, which I think you get from a few things in life. But like being a physician, I feel like you see people and interact with people every day. And one of the things you're really good at is reading people, right?
Right.
And, so we make a good team with that. And she found this property. Our good friend is an agent here, and the property had a gigantic backyard. Come to find out, and it was just the time when the ADU laws in California were coming up because we really need housing for people, and we saw that Oceanside was kind of on the path of progress, and so that was kind of going to be our first ADU development deal.
That is awesome. For folks who don't know what an ADU is, do you mind explaining what that is and why it's a strong strategy?
Yeah, I talk about it because in California, we talk about this every day, and it's, it's in our jargon, but for most people around the country, because, a lot of these ADU laws have not caught up in other states because you guys have a lot of land or whatever, but we don't have a lot of land. And so we are building a lot of what's called granny flats, what mother-in-law suites, whatever you want to call them. But ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. And it's basically, it can be a smaller home. It can be a home like the ones I've built are typically the same size as the single family home that I purchased. And in the backyard, if you have enough room, you can build an accessory dwelling unit or multiple units. And so that just provides more housing on that same lot. And if you think about that's an economy of scale, right? You bought the land already. How great would it be if you could add another property to that land? And so that was the time that those laws in California were starting to loosen up. When they first passed these laws, you had to live in the main house to build an ADU and rent that out. And those laws started to loosen a little bit so that investors could come in and start providing housing for people. And that just seemed like a good opportunity for me. And that was kind of one of our first projects in Oceanside. And I still have several projects in Oceanside that I just love. That area is fantastic. For those that don't know it, you should come visit. It was on one of the Real Housewives episodes, actually. So I know it's gaining some momentum. So yeah.
Yeah. Oceanside. I love Oceanside. One of my best friends for over a decade now is from Oceanside. I used to go out and visit them almost every year. And awesome. It's fantastic. Some of the best California burritos I've ever had. And,
yes.
Love Oceanside. That is awesome. Well, if folks are listening to this, they're thinking like, hey, what ADUs? That sounds interesting. What do you think makes a property that has a good ADU opportunity? You mentioned a large lot. Is there anything else that you're looking for that can be beneficial?
Yeah, and that first one was ideal. It was corner lot, and so those two houses, they enter on different streets, which is amazing. And there's a real sense that they are separate homes. So corner lot. My second one in Oceanside, double driveway, right? So if you can get a double driveway, it's definitely something to look for. Enough square footage that you can give people some outdoor livable space for both units or multiple units. You definitely want to have enough livable space for them. And those are really the big things. You got to have enough room, got to have access, extra driveway parking, very important. Outdoor space is important for people. Those are the things you want to look at. So yeah, that's kind of what I look at when I'm evaluating an ADU deal. I'm looking at properties every day. There's so many opportunities, actually more opportunities than I can actually buy myself, which is why I've kind of led into trying to help other people do this and do some investing with me. Because I come across opportunities like this every day. I'm looking at even on the MLS. I mean, all these deals are on the MLS and they come my way, and I don't have, there's not unlimited funding sources to do this, although I'm getting a little more creative about that these days as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love to hear that. What are some numbers, if you don't mind sharing? Like, what's a typical ADU play look like there, and how much value add are you able to do with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I bought that first property for $800,000 in 2020. I added an ADU for about $300,000. And then the property instantly after I built it was worth about 1.2, close to 1.3. So really could pull out everything that I put in to build the ADU.
Wow.
When you invest in Southern California, people historically invest here for appreciation because the cash flow is not great. Prices are high, even though rents are high. But now with the ADU play, because you've already got the land, you're already paying the property taxes for one, it doesn't go up by that much. Then you have an economy of scale, and suddenly your cash on cash goes from being almost nothing to greater than 10. And you're talking about Southern California. And so, that allowed me, and in future deals, to basically do a cash out refi after I built the ADU, pull out pretty much everything I put in to build the ADU, and then recycle it into the next deal. It's kind of the play, while still having good cash on cash.
Yeah. Yeah, that is huge. And, there's so many different ways that you can do that, so many benefits. You mentioned a lot of those, but also utilities are right there. So the utility work is minimal. A lot of great ways to really add value. What did that $300,000 investment to build that ADU, how big was that property? How many bedrooms, bathrooms?
It's interesting. Houses in San Diego are pretty small. So the main house was 1,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2 baths. ADU was exactly the same, 1,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2 bath. And, those houses fetch about $4,200, $4,300 a month for 1,000 square feet in coastal San Diego. So yeah, it's an expensive market, and so it's a great play if you can. One of the limiting factors for this ADU builds, they're a little cash intensive and time intensive, right? It's almost like doing the BRRRR on a property or rehabbing a multifamily. I mean, that takes time. And my goal was always to be cash flow even or even a little bit negative for the first year. But once you get that ADU built, then you're out of the gate, off and running.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great way to take advantage of a high appreciation market, but also cash flow at the same time. Yeah. And I think it's one of the few ways that you can do that in California.
I think you're exactly right.
Interest rates, the way that they are. Have there been any, frequent challenges that you've come across, whether that be zoning or whether that be, getting your permits, anything like that's pertinent for folks to know?
Yeah. My first one I did was a hybrid build. So they built the majority of the frame of the property of the house in a factory, steel framed. And then they craned it over. They put it on a flatbed, craned it over the main house. And so we were getting permits while we were building the house in a factory. And so that actually saved a lot of time. And I was pretty excited because I thought, wow, this could be the future, this prefab thing could be the future. And so the problem is going forward, materials started to get expensive. And at this point, that crossover still isn't there. Stick build tends to still be a little less expensive to build, $325 to $350 a square foot versus those kind of prefab hybrid sort of builds. So I saved a lot of time on the permitting on that first deal by building while we were getting permitting. No question, with more people building ADUs, the permit process is long, and the city's gotten wise. There's a lot of fees, school fees, meter upgrade fees. There's all these fees. So that's kind of a limiting factor. You can get permits. It just takes some time, say 6 to 9 months to get your permits in San Diego, maybe a little bit longer in Oceanside. So those are variables you have to factor in, right? Because you're holding a single family home, and that's why you want to make sure you're at least cash flow even. If you're a little bit negative, that's okay because you are getting a little appreciation. But that's the play there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if someone wants to build an ADU and they're looking to get some funding for that, are you able to take out a HELOC? Are you able to get a separate development loan for an ADU? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting. As doctors, we taught to pay off all our debt and not be in debt. And just like everybody else, I think my whole perspective on that changed when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? We're all like, wait a minute. We can't earn enough money to be successful and financially free. That was just like a light bulb that goes off in your head, right? I think we all had that moment. But so leverage was always scary. And I remember when interest rates went really low after COVID or during COVID, we had our primary residence and our house in Palm Springs. And I did a cash out refi on both. And my wife thought I was crazy for pulling out as much money as I could, leverage them to the hilt. But that allowed us to buy 2 or 3 properties in California. And so leverage turns out to be your friend. And so, I'm always looking for great funding sources. So that would typically be my play is once I did the value adding the ADU, I do a cash out refi. I'm now moving into some HELOCs on both the investment property, which are a little bit harder to get, but there are some places that'll do it. And if you can get one on your personal property, if you have enough, my wife again would worry about, please don't use our home as an ATM machine. But remember, when people think about that, they're thinking about buying cars and toys and things like that, right? You don't want to do that, obviously. And you got to be careful about leveraging your primary residence. But if you're buying a cash flowing asset, what's the worst that's going to happen is you're going to sell that asset, right? You're going to be okay. So as long as you're using that leverage wisely, I think it's okay. So now between HELOCs on the investment properties and on personal residence, vacation residence, those social things that I've been doing. I think my next strategy is to move into a DSCR loan or a portfolio loan so that I can have a bigger pool of leverage to kind of act on when I see something that I want to pull the trigger on. And then, you know, the most recent thing I've been working on is bringing other investors in, right? Like I said, there's a lot of these opportunities out there, but bringing other investors that may not have the know-how or won't have the time to do something like this, but kind of turn it into a small syndication where they benefit, I benefit. I bring the sweat equity, I bring some money. They bring some money, I bring know-how.
Yeah, it's a great way to do it. Yeah, that is fantastic. Yeah, you know, I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot more lately is kind of return on equity, right? And that's exactly what you're describing is like, hey, can I help take this equity in one of my properties and make more cash flow, make more equity in other deals, which you were able to do by doing those cash out refinances. And so, yeah, there's good debt and bad debt, and there's good leverage and bad leverage, and making sure that you're, you know, not overextending yourself, but utilizing that to your advantage can really help you grow and scale. Because eventually, if you get far enough in the space, you're going to run out of money, and you're going to have to get investors, or you're going to have to get creative.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Speaking of growth, you're working on a 52 unit development, right, in San Diego?
Yeah. So I was the reluctant syndicator / raiser, you know, and as part of I did the mastermind. That's the Kenji and Leidy's mastermind. They're semi-retired mastermind called 𝗵𝗆𝐵𝐿𝑑ers Pro, and they kind of introduced us to a little bit of raising for some deals. And I never thought it was for me, but I started to realize the value that I could bring to other physicians in particular, because I mean, you know, we're so busy. Like, you get busy as a doctor and you just don't have the time to learn a lot of this stuff. And so I was a little frightened a little bit to take money from my colleagues and friends. But then I realized what I'm doing for them is I'm bringing them an opportunity that they would never have. I mean, putting your money in a 401k, I hate to tell you, I mean, it's okay to do, but it's not going to get you over that finish line where you want to be that fast. That's you know, compound interest is not as good as compound leverage, in my opinion. So getting them into these assets was really quite good. And so, you know, then one of my goals came after I did a small raise. I thought to myself, I set a goal for myself is, could I lead one of these raises? And I didn't think I could, because I was just so busy with my doctoring work and such. And Kenji he lied to me and talked me into it. He's like, yeah, you could do this in the margins of your life, which was, he had to kind of lie to me to get me to do it. And I'm glad I did. And so I led a preferred equity raise I think we raised $2.5 million in about 3 weeks, right around Christmas 2 years ago. And then from that led to this next deal where we raised $3 million in about 4 weeks to buy some land. And then now we're going to move into phase 2 to build these 52 units here in San Diego.
That's amazing. Yeah, we need that push sometimes. And, you know, I feel the same way as you. Every time I have the opportunity to raise capital, I think about what an awesome opportunity it is. But it's terrifying at the same time. It's like, hey, you know, these are our friends, our family, our colleagues, you know, folks that have worked incredibly hard for their money, and they're trusting us with that to be able to provide them a great return and to do our best to do that. And it is such an honor. How has that project been going for you through phase 1, phase 2, and getting started? It's a pretty big development project. So what is that?
You know, what's interesting that I figured out at some point when I started building these ADUs is I like building some stuff. Like, it's fine to rehab stuff. That's cool and everything. But man, there's nothing like building something from scratch and then seeing people live in it. It's really awesome. So I kind of got that development bug. And I was you know, it's funny. Relationships are so important. You know, they can be good and they can be bad if you get in with the wrong people and you don't use your gut. Like, one of the big things for me is my gut feeling about people. Like I said, I think as doctors, we get, you know, you may have I'll have a patient and I'll talk to them, and then I'll say to my nurse, I'm like, is he hepatitis C positive since he's a drug user? Like, well, how did you know that? I'm like, I mean, after dealing with people so often, you get a sense for people's personalities. And so I think relationships are so important, whether, you know, you see a personality that you want to avoid or someone that you want to be around. And I met a developer here in San Diego in an old-fashioned real estate meetup here in town. And I didn't even think people did that, but this is a really big real estate meetup. A guy named Rich Summers who does boutique hotels. Rich is
I know Rich.
Heavy hitter.
Yep.
So I went to that meetup and met a developer named Isaac, and he and I have just become great friends. But like, he's just one of those super smart, super trustworthy people. And so getting back to investing our friends, colleagues' money, I feel like knowing the people that you're working with, is key. Those relationships and that trust, these aren't fly-by-night people. The guy that's doing construction for us, he's got skin in the game, and he has built half the buildings in San Diego. And so those relationships and trusting those people gives you a lot more comfort when you bring your friends and colleagues into these deals.
Yeah, absolutely. Having those relationships, that experience, that trust, the integrity, all that's so important. I do want to point out how cool it is. You've mentioned relationships multiple times and how, letting Kenji's masterminding courses, how that changed, the trajectory of your life, how going to a meetup changed the trajectory of your, real estate investing career. And I think for folks who are listening, who are on the fence about doing something like that, whether it's going to the meetup, whether it's joining a mastermind, whatever that may be, like, hopefully you're listening to this story and you've seen how far David has come and grown over the last 5 years in these awesome projects that you've done. And you feel encouraged that you can do the same thing. So I wanted to really foot stomp that, because I think sometimes folks get really timid about getting out of their comfort zone and going to the meetup and having that discussion. But it can really change your life.
That is uncomfortable, right? It can be uncomfortable as a doctor. Remember, you're the one that everyone looks up to. And suddenly you're thrust in a room where, you're equal there. You're not that guy at the top anymore. And so that's scary. People, to get out of that comfort zone of that is scary. But once you do it, you realize that these relationships that the relationships I've made in some of these communities are, they've been, again, one of the biggest benefits of all of this. I, by nature, I inherited this from my mom, am a worrier. And I know I inherited that from her. She worried about everyone. And I think she died of cancer a couple of years ago. And I'm certain that she died early of cancer because the negative energy and biochemistry, I think, that comes with that. And so this journey for me, actually, with these communities of people, with getting out of my comfort zone, that this personal growth has actually been the remarkable thing that I never knew I needed or I even wanted. And as silly as that sounds, it has been the biggest benefit in all this. Sure, having the properties and the cash flow and all that is generational wealth for your kids is great, but being a part of these communities and growing yourself, and that's been actually the biggest outcome for me, the best outcome for me in all of this. And I'm being earnest when I say that. It's not hokey. I really mean that, because again, I was the guy that thought this was silly and hokey. And for me to be here saying this stuff, I was a naysayer. So yeah, that personal growth is real, really is.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I think more and more as time goes on, we're going to see that pendulum swing back towards relationships and being together in community and all those sorts of things. And so I think that's really, really important. And I love hearing that for you. What does the timeline look like for you in this project? You mentioned you guys are getting ready to get into phase 2. So what's it look like for this build for you?
We're firing up phase 2. I think early summer we should be raise money to finish that, to get that raised, to actually do the building now. We're moving quickly through permits. We've got some good connections in the city, but we're going to be raising money to get that property built. That preferred equity raise we did, that building's built already. We came in at the end to try to finish that off because they added a bunch more units and they needed some more investors and needed some more money. We finished that off, and that's going to go up for sale. And so I've kind of now seen one of those come full cycle. So I'm excited about seeing this next one be built. But yeah, that's been exciting. It's, but I got to say, I couldn't do this without a group of people. This is not something you do yourself. I know you've had 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗀𝗪𝗀, one of my colleagues, ER doc. I think you're an ER doc, right?
Family medicine. Yeah, he's cooler than me.
Yeah, and he's pretty cool. But he kind of has helped me in this syndication race journey. And he's got a great team of people around him at Lightyear Capital. And they've just been great partners to help us get these projects off the ground. So shout out to other people that can help you do this. It's the who's in your life, not the how. You're not going to do everything yourself. And that's something you realize early on. You got to get other people to help you. And I have a great group and people that I've become really close with, incidentally, too. So.
Yeah, it's true, especially in these bigger projects. And, that's something that I do love about the physician real estate community as well. Is like, hey, we all understand for the most part that this is a team sport and we want people to win, and we want to help, teach other folks how to get into this game, into real estate and entrepreneurship sooner. And I know you mentor a lot of physicians and professionals as well entering real estate. What are some blind spots you see? What are some kind of hangups that you've noticed as you've been mentoring some physicians?
It's interesting. I feel like as doctors, it's a zero-sum game for us because that's how we're trained. Think about it. You're competing with everyone else to get into med school. You're competing with people that get into residencies and fellowships, test scores, all of this stuff. And so, we see it as if I'm taking, you're losing, right? And so the business world isn't necessarily like that. The entrepreneurship world is actually not like that. There actually is opportunity for all ships to rise. And I think that's the biggest mindset shift, I think, for physicians. It's super important is to realize that we can help each other. We can all grow. We can all do well. And so I think that's one of the hang-ups is seeing that, not everyone's out to get you. We can all do well together. And then, using resources, like I said, your CPA, I used to look at my CPA. Oh my God, I got to pay my CPA. I'm happy to pay my CPA because the amount of money that he has saved me in taxes because of our strategy working together, I will come to him with the strategy and he will help me implement it because he really understands that. Early on, I was using the CPA for my practice to do my personal. And this was interesting, when I first started investing in real estate, I realized she was wrong about a lot of, I want to get this tax benefit. I have this passive income. I want to use my depreciation. And she was like, no, you can't do that. And then I'd go do a bunch of research and prove it to her. And she was like, oh yeah, you're right. And then she'd send me a bill for $1,000. I'm like, wait, I just taught you this, And so back to my point is using the resources like your CPA, like your asset protection company, not seeing them as a liability. And so doctors get hung up that, oh no, that agent is a liability to me. They're costing me money because I got to give them money to buy this property. And so that's a big mindset shift, I think, for doctors going from the doctoring world to becoming an entrepreneur, realizing that those who's in your life are super important and you got to get past that. So yeah, those are some of the things that I find, my colleagues, as I'm trying to get them involved in entrepreneurship and learning about this stuff, I got to get them over those hurdles,
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. And, the other thing I've seen a lot is doctors getting frustrated and or just kind of being brutal to doctors who are in entrepreneurship and real estate of like, oh, well, why are you a doctor if you also want to invest in real estate? Like you have to choose one or the other. And I don't think that's the case. And I think you'd probably agree. And I know almost everyone I've had on the podcast has agreed that like some degree of financial freedom, some degree of alternative income is ultimately going to make you a better doctor, a better parent, a better spouse. And so it is really important to think about. And you can certainly have multiple passions in life and you can invest in real estate and you can be a great doctor and that is okay. You don't have to choose one or the other. And I think about how long the journey it is to become a physician too, right? And like, it's okay to have other things that you like and you enjoy as well.
But you're right. It is, historically, it's been so looked down upon for physicians to be entrepreneurial. But we have to realize that this is not the being doctor 50 years ago. If you look at, one of the things that why I advocate for physicians learning to invest and getting some financial freedom is if you look at what Medicare sets our payment has paid us, it's been flat for 30, 40 years versus inflation going straight up. And so that's why things feel so expensive to us versus your friends who are accountants or attorneys. They've raised their rates, right? And so I try to explain that you need to get into a business that goes up. Your widgets that you're selling, you can raise the price of those widgets because you kind of can't do that as a doctor. So yeah, we train for all these years and we're taught not to be entrepreneurial, but I think it's important. It does make you a better doctor. It makes you a better parent. If you do have some financial freedom, you're not always worried about exchanging your time for money, And I think we all still fight that. I know I still fight that. You're working half time and I'm so impressed by that. I got to tell you, because it must have been a little scary for you as you sat down with your wife to say, hey, I want to work less. I'm scared I'm not going to bring in the income. But this is important for me to spend time with you and the kids while they're little, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I know you're exactly right. I am slightly lucky that I came from the Air Force, so I was already used to like making peanuts. And so really my income didn't change too much, but the amount of time. But I was also faced with like, oh, well, I could go work full time and make double what I was making in the Air Force, or I can be comfortable, with making less. And, that was a conscious decision, but you're right. It was multiple conversations and, we're Christian. It was praying about that and figuring out, hey, is this the right path for us? And I realized like, my kids are young and, for me, I get so much joy out of spending time with them and going on camping trips and traveling and being able to do these things. It's like, there's always going to be plenty of doctor jobs available. And if you want to go back and go full time, you can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. If folks want to reach out to you, if they want to know more, if they're interested in investing in this project you have going, that 52 units in San Diego, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So you can just email me is probably the best way. My daughter told me yesterday I need to beef up my my social media presence. So I'm still working on that. But you can email me at david@𝗪𝗏𝐶oastalcapital.com. That's david@𝗪𝗏𝐶oastalcapital.com. That's probably the best way to get me. Or on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, get in touch. Love to bring people in to learn how to ADU invest and get involved in possibly some of these syndications to get them some passive income. Always happy to do that.
Absolutely. That is awesome. Well, it sounds like a great opportunity, and I really appreciate the conversation tonight. Thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, it's been Dr. David Namazy and Dr. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗏𝗏 with another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.